The Mannin Line with Andy Wint.
Faster Mai, good afternoon. Welcome to Mannin Line today. Halfway through this administration, we're going around all constituencies, talking to the brace of MHKs who serve the constituency. Today it's Douglas North. David Ashford was first elected to by-election in 2015, and then at the general election in 2016 and in 2021. John Wannenburgh, elected in 2021. We're with Douglas North today on Manx Radio. And Faster Mai, good afternoon, John Wannenburgh and David Ashford.
Good afternoon, Andy.
Nice to be here.
Good to see. OK, let's get straight to it. For Douglas North, some constituency notes now. Ray says, I'm a concerned resident of Cedar Walk in Douglas after long correspondence concerning a pedestrian crossing for Cedar Walk. Over 2.5 years. We're still waiting for the crossing to be installed. I think the situation is dangerous as the road's very busy, serving Nobles Hospital, Braddon Bridge roundabout. Pedestrians have no safe route to cross the road. What's happening? Concerned resident of Cedar Walk.
So this is something that me and John have been working very closely on and pushing DOI over. We've been working for a long time now to get a crossing point across the lower part of Johnny Watterson's Lane, because Ray's quite right, it is dangerous, particularly for school children in the morning and the speed of the traffic that goes down there. So the previous Minister for DOI, Mr Thomas, when he was in post, pledged that he would actually install a crossing. They did an assessment and it is in the work programme for DOI. I had a question to the House of Keys, to the Minister not that long ago, where he wouldn't give a commitment on timescales, which was very disappointing because we had, both me and John, learnt that it was supposed to be earlier the part of this year, but we are both going to continue to push the Minister to ensure that it's put in sooner rather than later, because Ray's absolutely right, it is not safe. And I must say I'm absolutely flabbergasted there hasn't been a major accident there.
John Wannenburgh?
Well, I would absolutely dovetail those comments. It's something that, I mean, as a matter of fact, it's right outside my house. And I see people crossing that road every day. It is absolutely something that needs to be done sooner than later. And it is frustrating that the ministers in DOI have changed and it seems to be pushed around a little bit too much for my liking. So, yeah, I had a conversation with the minister this morning about this, and it's definitely on the works plan, and David and I will keep pushing for that. The
road's going nowhere but getting busier and busier, isn't it, John? So, I mean, as somebody, as a first-time MHK, what's your opinion of the machinations of government and the speed at which government can sometimes run? Because you were in private enterprise for years and years and years, fleet of foot. And now you're facing a government bureaucracy. Yeah,
well, that's exactly how it is. And anyone who's been self-employed for a number of years goes into a machine like the government, you will be amazed as to how long decisions get taken. And action is even longer than that. The only thing I've seen move at breakneck speed was the gas regulation bill, which I supported. But everything else, it takes far too long for my liking. There's a number of pieces of legislation which are out of date as well, and that, again, takes years to work its way through the branches. So I'm not sure that a single MHK can come into the House of Keys and make things move faster. It's a very difficult situation. How can I affect that? I do what I'm doing already, which is pushing ministers on individual bits of legislation, or pushing DOI on the road crossing. It's difficult, but it's the way the animal is. We just have to make the best of that, I think. Okay,
right. Let's go to the phones now. And first of all, we got John on Manor Line. Hi, John. You're live with John Wannenburgh and David Ashford.
Afternoon, Andy, and afternoon, guests.
Afternoon, John.
How are you doing?
2 questions for you. I'll keep it simple, and then I'll just listen to your answer on air. The first is, what is the purpose of government? And the second question is, where do you get your authority from? Thank you.
Okay,
Bye.
David Ashford.
So in terms of the purpose of government, John, the purpose of government is to actually provide public services that benefit the public at large, so things such as the health service, things such as the police service, and to ensure that there is laws in place as well to actually govern how society runs and operates. And sorry, I didn't quite catch the second half of your question. You broke up a bit there.
Where do you get your authority
So
from?
the authority in terms of MHKs comes from the electorate with the general election that's held once every 5 years. We run a representative democracy, so we basically elect representatives in the constituents who then make the decisions on behalf of those constituents for the 5 years before we're then back up for re-election and potentially replaced if people aren't happy with what we're doing.
John Wannenburgh?
Yeah, of course I agree with that. I mean, we need a government. Without a government, you've got anarchy. You want your lights to work, you want your roads to run with rules. It takes an authority, an entity, and that's what we have. What was the second question?
Where does the authority come from?
Well, again, we all have a public mandate. The people have chosen us to represent them, so the people are the voice of God, aren't they?
Okay. John called up a couple of days ago, and part of his question, I'm paraphrasing him in now, was, how do you stop yourself being a delegate for each individual voter? I.e., if a voter says to you, I disagree with what you've said, or I disagree with the way that you have voted in Keys, what do you say to them?
I mean, you won't agree with everyone. We've got 5,000 people in the constituency, and, you will have people on equal measure that will be for or against something. So a prime example of that, which is going through at the moment, is assisted dying. I'm chairing the committee at the House of Keys looking into this. And I've had constituents who are fully in favour of it and saying, get it done now. And I've got other constituents who are very clearly saying to me, you must not vote for this. And you just have to be true to yourself. The point of representative democracy is you balance up the arguments and you come to a decision, and then you have to stand by that decision. You will upset some people and you will please others, and that's the game of politics, unfortunately.
You'll be unpopular with some people, particularly something as contentious and as kind of empirical as the assisted dying bill.
You will, but what I've always tended to find with the electorate is we don't give the electorate enough credit, I don't think. The electorate themselves always look at things in the round. So they won't just look at one particular stance of a candidate or an MHK. They will look at, the overall picture and do they believe that person is representing them? And they will go out and vote for the candidates they want. As I've said all along, at the end of the day, we're just representatives. We're there for 5 years. It's a 5-year fixed-term contract, and no politician should feel they have a right to be a politician. The electorate can go out and vote them back out just as easily as they voted them back in. And
your view on that, John Wannenburgh?
Well, many of the things which I vote on, it's a matter for individual conscience, and I will have an opinion on absolutely everything, whether it's the removal of the bishop or whether it's assisted dying. Of course, I will take on board what my constituents say to me, but one sure way to fail at this job is to try and represent everybody as they would wish. So at the end of the day, I will take a straw poll of what people think, and that's not, by the way, on social media. It's by talking to people, going out to see them, and then I'll come to my own conclusion and hopefully marry the two of them up. Again, you're never going to please everybody, and you know what? I don't think I'm going to try to please everybody.
Has a constituent ever changed your mind?
On
anything?
No, they haven't changed my mind, but they've certainly brought things to my mind.
Okay, which brings me on to an email in from Gwen, who just said, can you ask Mr. Wannenburgh? She said, I note he voted against the budget. Could you ask him why that was?
Very simply, I voted against the budget this year because I also voted against the budget last year. This year was due to the spiralling costs of the headcount. As a point of principle, I object to that enormously. And that was why I voted against it. Now, that said, there is a number of parts of the budget which I totally agree with. But we have to make a binary choice, and that was my choice. Okay.
Do you have any answer as to what government can do regarding headcount? Bearing in mind, I think as Dr. Ellenson said, a lot of that headcount is Department of Education and Social Care,
of course, that's
and
the
DHSC.
Yeah, that's the easy answer. I'm not sure I believe that. I can't believe that 800 people in the last 7 years have been employed. Every single one of them is a frontline job. I don't believe that. And it's a difficult decision. It's easy to say we're going to raise taxes. It's very easy. It's far more difficult to say we need to cut here or cut there. And we need to make those rough, tough decisions. And the sooner we start doing that, the better.
David Ashford?
Yeah, so it's not as simple as just saying, as perhaps the Treasury Minister has portrayed it in previous interviews, that all the headcount's going into DHSC or education. That doesn't necessarily mean they're teachers and they're nurses and they're doctors. They can be other roles within DHSC and administration and so on. So I think what government needs to do is they need to start from scratch. We need to go back to basics and actually say, what does government legally need to deliver? So what do they legally need to deliver? What do we require to do that? Then we need to look at, well, you might not legally have to deliver it, but if you didn't do it, it would cause massive problems. Then we need to look at what are the nice to haves and what are the non-essentials and actually build up. This is why I've been questioning the Treasury Minister about zero-based budgeting, because I think the way we do it at the moment, just piling things on year after year after year and building up on what, to my mind, I've become more and more convinced is a broken system, just isn't going to work. Einstein, as I said in my budget speech, once said that the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. In lots of areas, we do that as a government, and we need to stop it and start fresh.
So, again, what's the answer? Is it outsourcing, privatising, third sector?
So I think it's actually a mix of those. I think all of those are right in different things. So if you look, for instance, at DHSC, we are fabulously lucky on this island to have some of the third sector providers that we do. I won't name certain organisations because I'll forget others, but we've got massive amounts of experience out there in the third sector, and I just don't feel we're utilising them enough, and we should be, and that will help reduce headcount in government in itself. But then also we need to look at what jobs are we doing and what is actually being delivered, because what matters isn't the job that's being done, it's what is the outcome. And this is one of the things I've said about housing since taking on the housing brief. You know, what matters is what people see out there, what is going to change, because no one has ever said, thank God that government developed that data set, my life has improved massively as a result. It's the things that run off that matter, and I think that's where we're slipping up at the moment. We're not quite there in actually delivering tangible things that people can see, touch and feel.
But the public gets confronted with this, the fact that government headcount has grown. They don't know. I mean, I certainly don't know where it's all gone. Government never issues a list of who's been taken on and what functions they're doing, but it seems to grow like a fungus. Mr. Bell cut it back, and in the last administration, in Mr. Quayle's administration, it grew. Now, it could be COVID, it could be all sorts of things, but the public get confronted with this and feel, I'm not saying powerless, but out of the loop.
Yeah, and I think there does need to be more transparency around the headcount and the FTE. It's something I'm certainly going to be exploring as an MHK over the next few months with some of the comments that have been made in Tynwald around it. But I think also, I mean, you mentioned there about the cutback in headcount. It was a very temporary cutback. I think it worked for about 2 years where the numbers went down and then it came back up. Part of that was there was a cap that was imposed, but the cap didn't work because what it was doing was it was restraining, the arbitrary cap was restraining services as well. So services that did need to recruit, it was putting pressure on them. So we've got to remember there are certain services such as the ones you've listed, home affairs, health, education, DOI as well with the roads, which we've already spoken about, that do need workers out there. So what matters is not so much the number of FTE, full-time equivalent staff, but what that FTE is actually doing.
OK, let's go to the phones. Tony B, you're live with John Wannenburgh and David Ashford.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. Good afternoon, Andy. I just wanted to ask two questions, really straightforward. Well, I actually don't want to ask. I also want to ask one question. One question, and David Ashford should be able to answer this, since he's the only one I've ever come across who actually researches what he does. In the Treasury, can we not put in a higher rate of tax for those earning in excess of, say, £40,000 and make that tax much, much higher than the 20% or 22% we're going to inherit shortly? Is there a reason we can't put in a higher rate of tax for a band? Or is it something that we just don't want to do because it's easier to tax the poorer people?
Yeah,
That's one question.
Yeah, well, it's a very good question, Tony, because it's something I raised in my budget speech this year, asking the Treasury Minister, did he not consider maybe a 25p or 30p band on those over 50,000? And I didn't get an answer to that. But in relation to the amounts that are raised, if you look at the profile of people's incomes, the larger amount of people are actually in the lower income profile. So as you graduate to 50,000 and above, the actual amount you raise by a higher rate band isn't quite as much. So I can give a couple of examples, for instance, where if you introduced a 25p rate over 50,000, that would actually raise you roughly around about 10.5 million. A 30p rate on people over 50,000 would raise you about 21,000. But one of the big problems that we've got is the thresholds for income tax have remained steady. So that has actually had the biggest impact on those on lowest incomes, because as their income rises, more and more of it is going in tax. So the actual tax burden is falling hardest on the lowest and middle income earners. And I've made very clear that if the Treasury Minister doesn't do something to address that in the next 12 months, he can't count on my support next year for the budget.
John Wannenburgh?
Well, I mean, it's very easy to draw the conclusion that the lower people are paying more because they have less, and that can't be right.
Okay, I mean, do you think this with capping the thresholds and what have you, this is going to squeeze people, the squeeze middle, as it were?
Yeah, absolutely, it is, and there's no way around that.
I mean, and that can be construed as not being really fair on people who can't afford that.
No, and that's what I've just said, and it's very easy to do that. Let's be more intelligent about it. The people who got more should pay more.
Tony?
Yeah, I think they're great answers. So there is no reason why he couldn't have done it. He just didn't want to do it. And I don't think that a 30p increase is the way to go. I would say 50% once you get over 45, or 40% once you get over 45 or over 40, and then 45, and then 50 as you go up on each increment. You increase the tax levels, and that would bring in a lot more money than just the lower tax level, and you could have reduced the impact on the lower earners by dropping it to 1%, which would be far more equitable if you think about it. Now, I don't want you to comment on that. That's just my opinion. I hope you agree with me, but there you go. The other thing I want to mention, Andy, is I've just unfortunately got very old, and I wanted a vaccine which is supposed to stop shingles. I made an appointment. The day of the appointment, it was cancelled. And it turns out we don't have any shingles vaccine in the island, and the health minister doesn't seem to know this, or doesn't seem to care about it, and neither do MHKs, as far as I can tell. I was told that there is no prospect of us getting a vaccine in the island, so you can address that issue for people who are over 70. And this is on the government website that you should get this vaccine. It's actually on their vaccine list. And it's just a disgrace. So you've got people who are over 70, and until the budget comes back in April, that's what I was told, and I might be wrong, or the person who told me might be wrong, but I'd like that clarified, and I'm going to go to the health minister with it. Now, David Ashford has got some experience in this, so I'd like his comment on, does he think that's right?
Yeah, so Tony, this exact question I asked the Health Minister in the House of Keys around about 3 weeks ago about the shingles vaccine and access to it. My understanding is it's not restricted by the budget, but at this time, I don't know where that's come from, and it may be worth you speaking to Laurie Hooper about that, because I certainly haven't been told that. But my concern was around the criteria. Our criteria for access to the vaccine is different on Ireland to those in the UK, and the minister actually said to me that there was a paper coming to the department end of January to look to actually equalise the criteria between us and the UK, but I haven't heard that there's none available on Ireland. If that's the case and someone meets the criteria, that's deeply concerning, because the shingles vaccine prevents there being further complications for people in a broad range of vulnerable conditions later on. So it might be worth raising with Laurie if you've been told it's due to budgetary constraints, because I'm not aware of that. It was only, like I say, the criteria that I'd heard was different.
Okay, all right, Tony, thanks.
Cheers. Cheers, and thank you very much, guys. Bye.
Good to
Thanks,
hear from
Tony.
you. Jill W. dropped me a note in just to say, actually, we had a shingles vaccination last Monday, so there will be some, but not as much as we want, obviously. The Douglas North MHKs are on Manor Line through till 1. Text, email, call and WhatsApp. We're back to the lines in a moment.
Located in Upper Douglas, Woodburn House offers an elegant, one-of-a-kind space to host your unforgettable event. Celebrate your love story and say I do to Woodburn House. Our 2024 wedding diary is now open, and our wedding planner is here to take care of every element of your perfect day and make your dream wedding a reality. Woodburn House. Visit woodburnhouse.im or call 888 300. That's 888 300.
I began to struggle with the stairs, but I didn't want to leave our family home. So my daughter told me about Acorn Stair Lifts and their new showroom in Douglas. I was able to try the stair lifts and find the right one for me and the home I love. They were so friendly. The whole process was hassle-free, and they offered the whole package from installation to servicing. Choose the island's first choice for stair lifts. Acorn Stair Lifts, South Quay, Douglas.
Call Acorn Stair Lifts now on 672 414 or call into our Douglas showroom.
Construction waste today.
Tells recycle for another day.
A builder skip or two.
Tells Skips will bring to you.
At Tells Skip Hire and Waste Disposal in Snugborough, you only pay for the waste you bring. For waste disposal and skips, give us a call on 677 137. That's 677 137. Visit Tells today or find Tells Limited on Facebook.
Call Tells Skips today.
677 137.
Whatever your business, whatever its size, you can always rely on the island's leading fuel and oil supplier to keep you moving. Ellen Vannin Fuels, powering the island and powering industry. Call us on 844 000.
Every Sunday afternoon here on Manx Radio at 4 o'clock, join myself, Simon Clark,
as Mish Phil Gorn,
live with Gullis Gagan. We clarify and translate some Isle of Man place names.
Riet na Slagen. Well, Riet is a view, and then na Slagen is the hills, but in the construction there it means of the hills. So Riet na Slagen, the view of the hills.
Plus we go through some of the Manx words and dialect.
Surely everyone knows Shield, don't they?
Mischief. That's Gullis Gagan, live here on Manx Radio every Sunday afternoon at 4.
The Mannin Line with Andy Wint.
I don't know whether you know, whether you spotted, we're 60 years old this year, and every week on Mannin Line we're looking back, Monday and Friday, we're looking back at personalities and events over the past 60 years, and every Wednesday we go to look at buildings, revisiting Kelly's Eye with Peter Kelly and the late David Callister. Today we're looking back at the day or the year that B&Q was built. When B&Q appeared on the Isle of Man, I don't know whether you know, but the Q in B&Q stands for quail. I don't know whether they're Manx or not. Now, to really important subjects, Michael dropped a note in to say what's happening to the Manor pub, and the man for the job is John Wannenburgh.
Oh, well, I'm not sure about that, but I did speak to Heron and Brady last week, and they gave me an update, and that is to say that the Manor Pub has still been rewired, and thereafter be painted, and that work will take up until the next 6-7 weeks, and after that, hopefully we will get a date as to the reopening. So that's pretty much up to date from last week.
Have you heard, I mean, I heard all sorts of rumours that it was going to be closed and turned into a housing estate and knocked down and what have you.
I've heard various rumours, which is why I put the call into Heron and Brady, and that was what they told me last week.
The important thing to point out is that Heron and Brady doesn't actually own the site. The site's actually in the ownership of Douglas Council.
Oh, really?
It's actually a lease site.
Right.
So yeah, there does from time to time, and I've been around the block, Andy, as you know, and these rumours circulate about every 3 or 4 years, but the actual site itself is in the ownership of Douglas Council. It's not in the ownership of Heron and Brady.
Okay, Howard, you're live with John Wannenburgh and David Ashford.
Hello, David. Mr. Wannenburgh. Could you do me a favour first, Mr. Wannenburgh? You're very faint on the microphone, difficult in hearing you occasionally. But I'm going back to the Manor Hotel. I can remember that as a private house when it was when they first built Gulliston Estate in the 1949, 50s. It was a private house, and the little cottage down on Ballinard Road was the lodge house for the Manor, Williston Manor. So that's a little bit of history for you. But the question I would like to ask, either can give an answer. in the Howard Quayle administration, I think it was that one, the Chief Minister said we're going to reduce the number of persons working within the government. That was a broad scope because that covered all the road workers and everything, all the manual workers, and then going up into the offices. And there was a voluntary scheme where you could take early retirement, a voluntary scheme where you had a redundancy. But normally when there's a redundancy, that job becomes non-existent. But what I'd like to know, as there seems to be a massive increase in the number of employees within government, and we can only assume it's within the civil service, somewhere about nearly 800 people. How many of the people who took early retirement, redundancy, etc., have returned to the civil service or in government, and not necessarily in the job they were in, but in another part of the administration? Is there any records of people returning? Because that would give them, in a sense, continuity on their government pension.
John Wannenburgh?
I don't have the answer to that question. All I would say is that I totally agree with you that there's far too many people being employed by government. I mean, you mentioned the 800 people that you just said. I mean, effectively that's 1% of the population, and just in the last 7 years, you know. And I say it tongue in cheek, but you know, we're going to struggle to find some people who are not employed by government soon if we carry on the way we're going. But that's a useful question as to what you say there, Howard, and I'll see if I can follow that up.
And do you think it's anecdotal, the case of people leaving government employ and then going out of the front door and coming back in the back door as a consultant or freelance?
Well, have I heard of it happening? Absolutely, I have. Yes. I'm in two minds there. I mean, certainly they would bring back their skills and their expertise and their contacts. But equally, if you've taken the payment to leave, then, you know, give someone else a shot. And my thoughts are pretty much in between. But you know what? Never mind the individuals. It's the sheer number, the volume of people, which makes me really, really uncomfortable.
David Ashford?
Yeah, so in terms of your question, Howard, from memory, the Mars scheme was the Bell administration, not the Quayle one. It was slightly before the Quayle administration. It was the Mars scheme that allowed for the redundancies. As part of that scheme, again, I'm doing this off memory, you had to, the job had to be basically non-functional, had to go, and the person couldn't immediately simply return to government if they'd actually taken Mars. I remember putting a question in the last time round. I was a backbencher when I first came into Tynwald around the number of people and contractors that were returning who had actually previously left government, and although there were some, the numbers were actually quite low, and they tended to be in the frontline departments such as health, home affairs, particularly, for instance, I believe the police were bringing some back with experience to do certain bits of work, and also education as well, where people might have retired as teachers but were then going on to the bank for the teachers. So it was exceptionally limited in terms of pure civil service. There wasn't that many. Maybe it's a question worth asking again to see what the situation is now. But certainly the way it stood with Mars, people couldn't just come back from memory when the Bell administration did that.
Howard?
Yes, that sounds about right, because as I say, if a job becomes redundant, the person becomes unemployed, and obviously they can't just walk back into a job that doesn't exist. But I can appreciate where the health, the police and the nursing, because they're all vocations, but people working within government, there are a lot of surplus, and they're walking around. They used to say if you have a clipboard in your hand, you can walk around all day and do nothing. And it works, because you look industrious, but there's actually no work getting achieved. But yes, thank you anyway, gentlemen.
Okay, all right, good to hear from you. Thanks, Howard. Here's another message in for David Ashford and John Wannenburgh. Last time I voted for both of you based on doorstep conversations on how you would help young people with housing, says Pam. Can you ask John and David, after 3 years, my 27-year-old daughter is no further forward. Indeed, she's in a worse position. Rent's astronomical, never going to get on the housing ladder. Pam's daughter is leaving the Isle of Man. She's going to the UK. Another young taxpayer leaving. I know this is something that you've been vocal on, Mr. Wannenburgh.
Indeed, and both my eldest sons have left the island as well. It's a very hard situation to turn around, and it certainly won't be turned around tomorrow, as we've ably proved the last 2 years. Personally, what do I think? I would probably if I had the conversation with Pam on the doorstep, but what I would have said then is what I say now: we need to build more houses, and we need to build more social houses. That would be an enormous game changer. We need to look at as to how many landlords can own how many properties. Landlords owning hundreds of properties. I don't think that's a good thing. It's certainly legal. They're allowed to do that. But is it good for our young people? No, it's not.
Was it a common conversation when you were canvassing in 2021?
Oh, absolutely it was, yeah.
David Ashford.
Yeah, so this is one of the very reasons I agreed to take on the Housing Communities brief that I now hold, because I want to do something about this. I said at the start of this programme, Andy, that, what matters to people out there is what they can physically see. And one of the problems, I'll be quite blunt, over the last 2.5 years is people have not seen things shift in housing. Yes, there's been a lot of data collection, a lot of strategy. That now needs to turn out into a reality for people. So we need more affordable housing units being built. This administration so far has delivered 100 affordable housing units, but it's not enough. If we're going to meet the economic strategy ambitions, there's got to be more. As John said, social housing, although there's been the odd unit added here or there, or public housing as we call it these days, I keep getting told off for using social housing, public housing, it's not actually been that much change in the last 20 years in terms of the numbers. We need more of that, but also what we need, which always gets forgotten about, is last time housing. So housing for people to downsize into, to release the general housing stock as well. So it's a myriad of things. We've got a lot going on at the moment. So for instance, there's new affordable housing developments going on in Ballasalla, Colby, Ramsey. We've done amendments to the shared equity schemes to try and open them up, and those shared equity schemes are coming up for review again. We've also done amendments to the income thresholds for general needs housing, but I still think there's further work to be done there. In terms of essential workers, we've got a consultation out, which might just have closed, but if not, it's still active for people to consider, around how we treat essential workers and what housing we can do there. We've got the objective assessment of housing, which actually looked at what the housing need is on Ireland. That's actually just been completed. The Housing Board has looked at that, and hopefully we can present it to Council of Ministers in the next few weeks, and that will then start moving things forward. And one of the other crucial things in terms of those that do rent was having an arbitration scheme between landlords and tenants to be able to deal with conflict. That is going to come in this year, but the key driver now has to be actually delivering and building houses over the remainder of this administration. It came up on the doorstep time and time again. It formed a major part of my manifesto, and that's why I agreed to take on the role, because I want to be trying to drive this forward.
When was the last time any housing was built in Douglas North? Would that be the new estate by the new cemetery?
So the last big build was Retton-a-Shear, which is the one across from Williston. That was all affordable housing at the time. It was all first-time buyers. That was the last big one in Douglas North. We're not the most rural of constituencies. No. I think after Douglas East, we're the second most urban, actually. So there's not an awful lot more land to be built on in Douglas North.
So is it that difficult? I mean, if that was built, why can't another one be built? Another affordable housing estate be built?
Well, it can if you work with the developers. It's identifying the correct land and actually working with developers. I mean, one of the things I've said for a long time that needs to change within our planning system, and I said this when I was chair of planning as well, is around the commuted sums, where at the moment developers can buy their way out of building affordable housing on sites. They can actually give commuted sums to go into the housing fund or build infrastructure in the developments as well. The rules around that need to change. We need to be driving forward, because otherwise, not just Pam's daughter, but that whole generation's going to go. And as I've said in Tynwald time after time, the economic strategy won't be worth the paper it's written on if we don't get housing right.
With David Ashford and John Wannenburgh, Douglas North MHKs, and Juan's on now. Hi, Juan.
Hey, good afternoon, Andy. Afternoon, guys. John and David, how are you?
Hi, Juan. Very well.
Yeah, good.
Hi, good. I don't want to divert off my subject, but just listening to what you were saying before, John, I totally agree. I mean, the size of government is way too heavy, and as Howard said, we have to be careful of the people that we are getting rid of, and that's the paper shufflers and the post-it note brigade, and not get rid of the people who are doing the work on the bottom floor. But yeah, government is far way too heavy, and that's taken a lot of our reserves from us. As far as housing goes, I'm in an area at the moment where I came back 5 weeks ago. The land was empty. I came back 5 weeks later, and there's a 300 house apartment up in wood built, and it's ready for topping out, and all the inside being done, but the frames are all up, so that things can be done at speed. And you talk about emergencies, and I don't see anything happening at any great speed to cover emergencies. And I've said before about manufactured homes is a way to solve your emergency for the short-term periods. But again, nothing seems to be happening very fast. And going on to older people's communities, in the States, they have a lot of communities for over 50s with a clubhouse, communal activities inside, with restrictions for people that are over 50s and no children. So maybe that kind of thing might be an answer for going forward in the Isle of Man. But that's not my main thing. My main consideration, Andy, you said yesterday about the Chief Minister, and he had a direction, he was driving the bus. And I'm just wondering which bus he's driving and whose direction he's going in, who's actually setting the direction of this bus. Now, David, you've been inside the Coven, so you know what goes on inside there. But I wanted to ask both of you guys, first of all, your views on the vote of non-confidence in the Chief Minister. For a long time now, I've seen that I haven't seen as much disrest from people at the moment, and I'm sure you all know by looking at social media the amount of disrest that's going on. People are concerned about, it's not so much taxes getting raised, it's what you're going to do and how the money's going to get spent. Who's advising you, and is ministers in a position to actually take the reins here on if they're getting advised wrongly? So that would be my first thing on what your views are about the Chief Minister's vote of non-confidence. Okay. And also,
and the second one is,
what would you do to reform government going forward? Because there definitely needs to be a reformation. Something's not working properly, and we're taking directions from far too many places, which is not relevant on the island. So what would you guys do to reform government?
Okay, John Wannenburgh.
Well, the first thing I'll say, I wasn't one of the people who supported Alf Cannon in becoming Chief Minister. And for the record, I would not have supported Alex Allinson either. And I would not have supported David Ashford, because they were all ministers in the previous administration, and I was dead set against that. Now, having said that, I'm very uncomfortable with trial by social media. I don't think if you remove Alf Cannon and you put in anybody else of the 23, that any of the problems we have today will disappear. So would I support the no confidence at the moment? I don't think I would, no. I think what people expect from the representatives, the House of Keys, they rightfully expect integrity and character and courage, and none of the things I'm seeing at the moment bring those things to mind, those characteristics to mind. And we're in a hard place, but we need to get through it. You know, when you refurbish a house, it looks an awful lot worse before it looks better.
Okay, and reforming government?
I won't be very popular for saying this, but I think there should be far fewer MHKs.
Okay, David Ashford.
Yeah, so in terms of the first bit, I think when it comes to votes no confidence, I would say you've got to be very careful about the law of unintended consequences. None of my colleagues have put forward to me what the alternative is at the moment. And nobody, to be frank, has put forward a vote no confidence either. We keep hearing about a vote no confidence. Well, any member can table that if they wish, but nobody yet actually has. They've talked a lot about it, but nobody has really given me what the alternative is to this administration at the moment. And, you know, the way I describe it is if you're on a bus speeding down the road, the last thing you do is shoot the driver. So I think, you know, I just worry about what comes afterwards, because people always say, oh, well, things can't get any worse. Well, things can get worse. And, you know, there's the old phrase, isn't there, this is the worst administration till the next one. And I do worry about that. But having said that, I do feel there is a disconnect between government and the people out there. The people I speak to just feel more and more divorced from what they're hearing from government. The messages that are coming out don't bear reality to their day-to-day lives. So the plea I would make to government is they need to start thinking more and actually listening more to the people that they represent, and ensuring that, you know, that what they're doing actually has tangible benefit on the ground. Because, like I say, we can discuss as much as we want in the hallowed halls of Tynwald and government. What matters isn't what we discuss, it's what happens out there, what people see. That's what people want. And as for reform of government, I'll stick with what I've always said, which is we need local authority reform, 5 authorities, and we need one single government.
North, south, east, west and Douglas.
Yes, that's what I've always supported for local authorities. And in terms of government, at government level, let's be blunt, we need one single government, not departments that have all their own independent legal entities going off doing whatever they want. We need one government. Isle of Man government at the moment does not exist as a legal concept. It needs to. And then we might get a bit of joined up government, and heaven forbid we might actually start getting some results as well.
Back in a moment with final words from John Wannenburgh and David Ashford.
We interrupt this broadcast to inform all our listeners about the huge range of bathrooms and showers on display at Pacesetter. Yes, you all know that Pacesetter is known as the island's largest tile store, but I'm here to tell you that their bathroom displays are truly inspirational. Visit Pacesetter on Harris Terrace, where you'll discover a fabulous collection of stylish bathrooms. There's something to suit everyone, with design available. Pacesetter bathrooms and showers to show off about.
Have you been invited to take part in the Household Income and Expenditure Survey? It's one of the most important surveys for our island, because the information you provide is vital data for our island's financial planning. It helps us calculate our VAT revenue from the UK. Plus, it gives us a better understanding of the financial strains on residents, so we can support those who are struggling. March is the last month you can take part. So visit gov.im/HIES now.
In life, we plan for birthdays, anniversaries and holidays. But what about planning for the unexpected?
I've worked hard all my life. I want to make sure everything's in place for my family.
Man Benham understands. We specialise in enduring powers of attorney, mental health receiverships, and are there for you when mental capacities decline.
Thanks to Man Benham, your legacy is protected.
Secure your family's future today. Visit manbenham.com, because peace of mind is the best legacy.
Here at the Ramsey Park Hotel, we're delighted to introduce our new executive head chef, Leslie Jacob. With a food philosophy of classic food combinations and flavours and his international experience, Chef Leslie excels in both New World cuisine and classical cooking, with the emphasis on great ingredients combined with skill and intelligence to delight diners. Call 818-123 to book the Lakeview restaurant at the Ramsey Park Hotel and discover seasonal specials, lunchtime offers, winter a la carte menu, Sunday roasts and more.
The Mannin Line with Andy Wint.
It's Douglas North today with John Wannenburgh and David Ashford. The next constituency Mannin Line is a week today, Wednesday the 6th. Alfred Cannon and Tim Johnston will be in representing Ayr and Michael. And David, you're live with John Wannenburgh and David Ashford.
Hello there, hi. In 10 months' time, the new building regs come in where you can't fit a gas or an oil boiler into a new property. You've got to go with renewables. And we've been talking about affordable housing for years and generally first-time buyers. And I'd like to know what the panel think about the fact that it's going to add thousands of pounds
to a new build, which pushes the affordability out of the reach of many affordable housing and first-time buyers. Not only that, who's going to be installing these? Who's going to inspect it? Who's going to maintain it? If you want a mortgage on a property and a surveyor turns up, what knowledge is he going to have of all these renewables? Because there's nothing on Ireland to give tradesmen and professionals the insight into what's going to happen in 10 months' time.
David Ashford?
Yeah, so just in terms of that, David, there are several companies I know that are already gearing up in relation to this. So we're already getting their personnel trained to be able to cope. In terms of the affordability, obviously, as one of the things we were very careful not to do was to try and move too quickly too early. So we are moving in line with many other jurisdictions, which actually means the price of the installations is actually coming down. You only have to look at where the price point was 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago to see that coming down. It will come down further. And when you build affordable housing as well, it's very rare to build it in a small number of units. You normally do larger number of units, which again gives you the capacity around price. So that is one of the things that is being factored in. So for instance, between 24 and 26 now, we're looking at potentially another 155 affordable housing units, and that will be factored in to it to ensure that it doesn't actually push affordable housing out of the affordable category.
John Wannenburgh?
Yeah, well, I agree with David. But, at the end of the day, when do we make the changes? There's never an ideal time. But we've got to go forward as we mean to go on. And, as the MUA chairman, what I can say is that the more houses they build, the more electricity will be used, and I'll be a happy guy.
Okay. All right. Thanks, David.
Just before you go, David just mentioned looking at other jurisdictions. Let's look at another jurisdiction. If you want help with renewables in the UK, you can get a grant up to I think it's £8,500 for air source heat pumps. You can get grants for solar. You can get grants for putting an electric charging point in your garage. The government wants to go green. Where's the money?
So there's the energy efficiency grants, which are done through DFE, and I know the Treasury has been looking at how they can utilise parts of the Climate Change Fund as well in relation to grants, but there is a whole swathe of grants around solar, around other aspects that are on the DFE webpage.
Okay, thanks, David. Good to hear from you. Finally, for John Wannenburgh and David Ashford, here's a question in, and this is from Alison, who says, horse trams to the sea terminal or not, John Wannenburgh?
I was dead set against extending them from the War Memorial to the sea terminal building, but I've had the conversation. So going back to the topic of the hour this morning, you asked me, has anyone changed my mind? And yes, they have changed my mind, but that was Charles Garden, Alex Brindley. I went into conversations with him, and on this aspect, I think we should go back to the sea terminal.
David Ashford?
Yeah, I've been always very clear on this, Andy. If you're going to run the horse trams, you've got to run them the full length. At the moment, it's a tramway to nowhere.
Okay, we've been live today with Douglas North MHKs, David Ashford and John Wannenburgh. And the next surgery, John Wannenburgh, is?
It's the third Saturday of every month.
Okay, so that will be when? Trying to work that out. It's going to be the first 8th, 15th, is it?
Try and get my calendar up. It is 16th, Saturday the 16th of March.
And it's going to be
11:30 to 1 at Williston School.
And you're there with some Douglas councillors, I think, as well.
We normally have all 3 Douglas councillors present for Douglas North as well.
Okay. Thanks for being with us today, John Wannenburgh.
Yeah, my pleasure.
And by the way, will you be standing next time, Mr. Wannenburgh?
Time will tell.
David Ashford?
I never decide until about 6 months before, you know that, Andy.
Thanks for being with us today. So we're back with an open line tomorrow, and next Wednesday, Aaron Michael, Mr. Cannon and Mr. Johnston will be on. If you want to follow up, email manninline@manxradio.com or the answer phone on 682-631. Thanks to Chris on the phones today. Enjoy the rest of your Wednesday.
WINT
60 years serving you as the nation's station. This is Manx Radio.
Peter, what's Kelly's Eye looking at today?
Today, David, in all the programmes we've done to date, we've been very careful to watch our P's and Q's.
Yes.
And today, we're watching our B and Q's.
We are. B&Q, entrance, exit. You can't miss it, can you?
You can't, and most people will say it's never changed, but it has. When did it open? It opened the 14th of July, 1986.
Yes.
So it's 19 years old, almost 20 years old. And not all that long after it opened, a few years, 5 years, whatever, it was extended. And if from where we're standing at the bottom of the car park, the entrance as it is now was built out. I don't really remember before. It was just sort of a doorway straight into the building. So they built out this porch and put the big B&Q lettering on the side. But if we look to the right of that, you can see where it says customers loading only. There's a large opening which was filled in.
Yeah.
Can't remember whether that was a window or staff entrance or what it was, but that was the end of the building.
So they added on... not
5.
quite as much again, but...
Yeah, well, 6 bays. Of course, it was a portal frame, steel frame.
Yeah.
Because you can see the change in colour of brick, which certainly increased it by 40% more anyway.
Yes, absolutely.
And it's ongoing because now they're putting a mezzanine floor in on part of it, and who knows, one day that might actually be a complete first floor.
Yeah.
And it's forever popular. It's a straightforward building. It's, as far as I know, was an in-house design by B&Q. One politician said it'll never last, and how they have this habit of opening up and getting special offers because they get good deals from the suppliers, but they'll be gone, and here we are 19 years later.
Yes.
And it's still here.
In its very, very simple form, though, I mean, apart from the big B&Q on the front there, it's nothing except a straightforward set of panels, really, isn't it?
Yeah, it's an industrial building, and inside there are no frills either. But this is a formula that this is what B&Q have in various places throughout the country. Nowadays, some of the more modern ones are a different design, but the concept is the same. And this, I suppose, is an American idea, really, initially. But this is the way retailing is going.
Part of Island life for 60 years. This is your Manx Radio.